All right, our top focus at this hour, EU leaders agreed to open talks with Ukraine on joining the bloc after Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban ducked out of his threat to veto the plan. Now, European Council President announced the decision, which also included starting negotiations with Moldova as a sign of hope for their people and for the continent. However, Budapest blocked $55 billion in the European Union aid for Kyiv.
We want to support Ukraine. It's a very powerful political signal. It's a very powerful political decision. And today and tonight, I think to the people of Ukraine, we are on their side, and this decision made by the member states is extremely important for the credibility of the European Union.
Orban, who had insisted for weeks he would block the move, agreed not to be in the room when the other leaders made a consensus decision on accession talks. The Hungary Prime Minister denounced what he dubbed a completely senseless, irrational and wrong decision, but complained that 26 other countries insisted the decision be taken. Now, if he had chosen to use his veto, Orban could have derailed the summit. He backed down one day after the European Commission unlocked $10.4 billion in frozen funds for Hungary. Now, the EU summit also granted candidate status to Georgia, one step behind formal negotiations. Volodymyr Zelensky, who did not attend the knife-edge summit, hailed the decision as a victory that motivates, inspires and strengthens. Now, the president said, and I quote, Moldova turns a new page today with the EU's go-ahead for accession talks. The White House, which faces opposition from Republicans in the United States to its own support for Ukraine, hailed a historic decision. The decision to open membership negotiations with Kyiv provides a major boost for Ukraine as fears swirl over Western support. However, the road remains long to actually joining the EU. Before the talks can be launched, EU states must agree on a negotiating framework, giving Orban ample opportunity to stall the process again.
This is a historic moment, and it shows the...
Now, European leaders failed to agree to a budget plan, including aid for Ukraine, after an objection from one member. Charles Michel, the president of European Council and summit host, said leaders would return to the issue early next year, after Orban said he had vetoed funds for Ukraine. The situation on the battlefield in Ukraine does not look promising for Kyiv after a counteroffensive failed. Putin boasted on Thursday that he has 117,000 troops in Ukraine and that their positions are improving. Across Brussels at the NATO headquarters, Alliance Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned that the West must continue supporting Ukraine in order to protect the rest of Europe. All right, we are now joined by William Courtney, Adjunct Senior Fellow at the RAND Global think tank. William, thank you so much for joining us. My first question to you, could you just tell us what will be the impact and the procedure of Ukraine's accession to the EU here?
The accession will, of course, as you pointed out, take a number of years, and that's been the case for previous entrants into the European Union as well. But it is a striking sign to the Kremlin, to Moscow, that Europe sees Ukraine as an integrated part of Europe, and the idea that some in Moscow have that Ukraine could be brought back into the Russian area of influence is not going to work. Ukraine is now going to be European for sure.
Also, William, if you could just tell us, Orban, we know, has blocked a $55 billion aid. Now, what will be its implications on the ongoing war?
There shouldn't be too many implications. It's useful to look at both Orban's objection to the aid and in the U.S. Objection of some Republicans to assistance to Ukraine. In both cases, Orban and those Republicans are taking transactional approaches. They are seeking concessions that are really unrelated to Ukraine. So Orban is trying to play for recovering funds from Brussels, which Brussels has held back because of rule of law, other concerns about Hungary. And the Republicans here are urging concessions by President Biden on border security. Now, as it turns out, the border situation is becoming more serious. Close to 10,000 refugees are coming across the border every day now. So the Biden administration has an incentive to tighten border security. So we're likely to see some concessions, which President Biden has talked about, to enable an agreement. And we're likely to see a similar thing in Europe. So in both cases, the obstacles are likely not to be permanent.
Okay. William Courtney, thank you so much for joining us with your inputs on this particular topic.